as we're talking. I just want to be able to engage you in a nice conversation. I know a lot about you, probably more than you think.
Uh-oh.
But I always practice like drawing it out because of course I don't want to be talking for you. Of course, I want to hear from you. So, how are you doing today?
I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, how about you?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. It's nice to speak with you, and I'm a big fan. I know you have lots of folks that are engaged with you on Instagram, but I love your Instagram, and that was one of the reasons why I got up the courage to say, let me reach out to Tara and see if she would like to be on this podcast. I've had it for a few years, Tara, and I mainly focus on the business community on LinkedIn. A lot of business contacts all over the world, and that's why I really wanted to explore talking with you because I know the ones who have been listening to my podcast for many years will be so excited to hear your mindset and your viewpoint and just the real human that you are.
All right.
How's that for an intro?
That is quite the intro. I shall try to live up to it.
So, of course, we know that you have done an amazing job with the Star Trek role. What amazes me a lot about you that I want to talk about, you impress me as a human being. I mean, you haven't let like your success go to your head or it to stop you from being interested in things. And I really want to start with your monarch butterflies because
Oh. Hmm.
just can you tell everyone what you do year after year to help contribute to that amazing metamorphosis of these butterflies?
I think it started initially somebody in my immediate community, when their daughter was young, they were carrying around a chrysalis in a mason jar, and I became very intrigued, and they were waiting, of course, for it to emerge. My daughter's 15 now, but I think it must have been when she was maybe about 8 or 9 years old, we decided to try it ourselves. And of course, it's in conjunction with the fact that they're now an endangered species. I don't know if they were at the time that we started, but they certainly are now. And so it's become increasingly important for me to do it every year. When we first see them arrive, we start to look on the milkweed plants for where they leave the eggs and bring them inside. And when they hatch, we feed them milkweed all through the different they're called instar phases, the different phases of the caterpillar. They grow so quickly and they shed skins along the way because they grow so fast. And then we see them through when they go into chrysalis. Then once they emerge, we set them free. And the entire process takes about a month. So this year was a little bit scary, actually. A lot of them were sick, and apparently there was some kind of fungus on the milkweed. So not all of them made it, and that was very heartbreaking for me. We still saw about 20 through the entire phase. And apparently this is a statistic I looked up because I was just very curious. If you leave them in the wild, it's less than 5% make it from egg to butterfly. They have so many predators, yeah. I don't really want to talk about it so awful. They actually imploded. They turn a dark color and they just, all the fluid comes out of their system. They don't even go into chrysalis. It was heartbreakingly low. I've usually have close to 100% success rate with the ones that I bring in. Although granted, this year was the largest harvest of eggs ever. So I might go back to smaller numbers and see what happens next year.
You almost have 100% success year after year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 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 And it's amazing. It's like I have photographs of and actually video of all the stages. I have video of them going into chrysalis, which is wild. It's like they look like an alien entity. And then the chrysalis, they change color. Initially, they're green, and once the butterfly is getting ready to emerge, the chrysalis turns translucent, and you can see the wings inside. Like they're quite stunning. And then I have video of them emerging from the chrysalis. There's a small break in the chrysalis itself. Their whole body pulses, and then they kind of do a backflip out, and then their wings slowly descend, and they have to stay there for about 4 hours while all the fluid comes out of their system and their wings dry before they're able to take their first flight. I mean, partially it's selfish because I think the whole process is completely magical. Like it's truly a miracle. You're laughing. As you mentioned in the introduction, I've had quite a deep relationship with the natural world for a long time, and it's something that the whole butterfly thing is just part and parcel of that.
What really made me start following your Instagram, of course, I had seen you on Star Trek because I didn't know of you before that. And I'm like, who is this person? And then I started learning more about you and I found your Instagram. And what made me really follow it was all these scenes, like where you're walking with your family or you're walking with your dog. Where do you live that all these open fields and in the winter snows that you just can lay down and start making angels? Where is this place?
So I live in Niagara on the Lake, Canada, which is about an hour and a half outside of Toronto, very close to Niagara Falls. Like if you were to follow the falls down and go along the river to Lake Ontario, that's exactly where I live, where the Niagara River meets Lake Ontario. I couldn't tell you what the population is. I don't pay attention to such things, but it's a smallish community. It's very much a tourist town, but how I ended up here is it is home to the Shaw Festival, which is the second largest theater festival in North America. So my husband and I are both actors. My background is primarily in theater, and we met here doing a play, and then shortly thereafter we became pregnant and our daughter was born. So Niagara on the Lake kind of by accident became our permanent residence. But we're so lucky because, as you mentioned, there is so much green space. I mean, heartbreakingly, much of that is being developed as we speak. Even though the community has rallied, there's been a lot of developers with a lot of money come into town and cutting down trees and whatnot. But anyway, like during the pandemic, it was such a godsend to be here. I couldn't imagine being somebody in an apartment building in a city center on the 16th floor having to navigate COVID. But, and then close to our house, we have probably one of the most amazing dog parks that isn't even fenced. It's called the Commons. It's a big open field, and alongside of that is a meadow, and then on the back of it are woods. And we have the luxury of walking our dogs there. I walk our dog, sometimes 3 hours a day. Yeah, and then there's also the golf course, which we can use to walk in the winter, and that's right on the lake, right on the lake shore. So
The excitement that you give off when you're in those areas and your comments is like palpable. I mean, I know your iPhone gets a workout.
yeah, photography's become like a hobby for me. I love trying to capture things. I mean, it's mostly nature. Sometimes I try to take portraits. A lot of my dog. My daughter doesn't let me take pictures of her anymore. Yeah, so my phone does get a good workout, yes. I don't know. Like, I think people sometimes come full circle. So when I was a child, my life was very nomadic. I was actually born in the States in Seattle. My mom left my dad when I was very young. She was pregnant and we lived in so many different places. And one of the places we lived was on a market garden in Vernon. Well, we worked on the market garden and sometimes we lived there in the summer, but in the winter we lived actually on Indian reserve. I was in nature a lot as a child, and certainly that's one of the things that my mother values. But I don't know that I had an appreciation for it as a child, just like classical music, right? Like my mom's a music therapist and she would play classical music all the time and I hated it. And now, at the ripe age of 53, I can say that I do enjoy classical music. But my deep love and enthusiasm for nature and sort of plugging into environmentalism, I think that's happened over the last decade, really. Yeah, I just find it very peaceful. So, and I'm, of course, devastated by what we are doing to the planet.
Your little green shop you formed during the pandemic had you active.
Yeah, so I mean, we were all out of work. And I've gone on a lot of adventures in my life. I guess kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, or I just I take big risks, or I dive deeply into different projects and explore them for a while and then move on to the next. But yeah, I had a friend here living at the time. She offered to build me a website, and I started contacting companies. I wanted everything to be as local as possible, so contacting companies within the province of Ontario, ideally, but trying to stray no farther than Canada, who were creating small batch eco-friendly products for one's body or one's home. I'd never worked in retail before. I started working in retail and trying to introduce the immediate community to environmentally friendly options. Some were keen, not many were keen. I live in a very wealthy area, and I think some people are just happy to continue using whatever products they have in like, and perhaps aren't that kind to the planet. But yeah, and I tried to do delivery on foot or by bike. Everything was, of course, wrapped in environmentally friendly ways. I went pretty deep. I would make origami butterflies and write poems on them and sew those onto the packages. And it was a labor of love, and it kept me engaged, and it kept me busy and made me a little bit of money on the side. But ultimately, I became frustrated that more people weren't as enthusiastic about what I was selling as I was.
You seem to be a risk taker, but you do things that go against the grain.
Yeah, I guess so. I try to listen to my compass. I try to go where my heart is telling me to go. Maybe a little impulsively, I take those steps. I can't say that I've ever regretted. Like I loved doing Little Green Shop. I also studied yoga for a while and taught yoga locally. And then the last kind of that adventure or following my heart or following my compass was doing the directing internship at the Shaw last year, which now I'm so grateful that I did that, because now I know that I want to direct. And I wouldn't have known that unless I did that. So going in, I had done very little directing, but I knew that the little bit that I had done had been very stimulating and challenging and felt deeply rewarding. And to do the internship, I know, it's a really scary, I'm going off the path a bit, but it's a really scary time for us working. I think in the arts in general, certainly anybody working in theater or film and TV, the work is drying up. You kind of go, oh, hey, I'm 53. I'm going to go to the School of Directing, severely reduced paycheck at a time when nobody's really generating any income. And I'm going to see if I like this, because then, of course, after I go to directing school, there's going to be so many jobs. I'm just going to be living the life. I finish and I love it and I want to do more, but I feel like I'm starting as I did as a young actor, banging on doors saying, hi, can you please open the door just an inch so I can so I can talk to you about my new passion, and maybe you can throw me a bone. That's kind of where I love that you find this amusing. But I wouldn't have it any other way. That's it. To my way of thinking, we have one life in this body, and if we don't live it, then what's the point?
The reason I laugh is because my best friends on LinkedIn, we all are outreach people where we knock on doors, we call people, and we just want them to open it an inch, so they can throw us a bone. So just like you said, it's like so many people, they just want to send an email and just hope that someone responds. I understand what you're saying. You're an entrepreneur. You just keep knocking on doors until something opens, right?
Yeah, I guess thank God I have the background that I do. I feel like you have nothing to lose, but it's like, you wouldn't know unless you tried. Why not try?
Exactly, exactly. And this, I envision people flocking to want to hear more about you. And even people that want to work with you will get to know you through this podcast and see, hey, how can I contact her? So, if somebody wants to contact you about a collaboration that would be mutually beneficial, would they go through your agent?
Well, they go through my agent if it involved acting. Yeah, that would only involve. I mean, I've I've convinced my agent to represent me as a director,
Oh, you
but
have. Well,
but
that's
he
another sale.
but he's agreed. He's agreed. He's like, I had to speak to a number of my friends who have transitioned from acting to directing already. I wanted to solicit their opinion about the benefits of having an agent. They kind of all said, oh, my agent doesn't hustle for me, but they do negotiate my contracts because often I might miss something. So I convinced him just on that premise that he wouldn't have to hustle for me as he does. Like, of course, he hustles for me for my acting work in terms of getting the auditions. But he said he'd be happy to negotiate my directing contract. So I hope sometime within the next few months to present him with one. I'm gonna be overly optimistic in that realm. Yeah.
Well, I think that's how you are by nature.
For the most part.
Yeah, and the optimism isn't like thinking it will always go perfectly, but I turned 58 this summer and it's just like been there, done that. I've seen so many things and it's just like you just rebound and you learn from it. Just as I read about you and study things about you, you learn from things.
Yeah, I mean, I think as human beings, hopefully we do learn, and sometimes I think we have to revisit the same thing numerous times before we actually do learn. But yeah, I try to, like I'm the kind of person that will say, oh, well, if I didn't get what I want, as opposed to going down, the path of dejection, I'm going to say that the universe has something else in store for me. I'll leave it at that.
I want to just revisit for a second that Indian reservation. What was that all about? Like, what did you get out of that?
So I was quite young. It was pre-grade one. It might have been kindergarten, grade one. So my mom had fallen in love with a market gardener, and he had a big piece of land outside of Vernon, which is in the Okanagan, which is the interior of BC. And so she moved me and my brother to the Okanagan. There was tents on the farm, and we would live in town in the winter. But there was also like a small cabin on the Okanagan Lake on an Indian reserve that this man that my mom was in love with, I don't think he owned the cabin. I think he rented it because he was maybe 1/8 or 1/16 Indigenous. And so we lived there. We had no running water. I remember we would take baths in a tin tub on the beach, and there was, an outhouse. Like, it was pretty rural. It was pretty rustic. I wish I knew everything about how I grew up. At one point, we lived on a commune, I think, on a hippie commune. I did try to count all the places we lived, and I think we lived at almost as many places as I had lived years. Like, we moved all the time. My mom went to art school in Nelson, BC. We moved to the Okanagan. We lived in Squamish. We lived in Richmond. We lived in numerous places in East Vancouver. That's kind of where I spent the most of my adolescent years, was on Commercial Drive in Vancouver. But yeah, it was hardcore nomadic. My mom was trying to put herself through school with two young children. One of them, my brother, he had a hard time being on the planet pretty much as soon as he arrived. She had a lot to contend with. Yeah, it was definitely, I'll say, an adventure.
That kind of makes me wonder when you became 13, you found that being introduced to acting just was mesmerizing. Does it have anything to do with the nomadic experience?
Well, yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that my mom was very young. Like, she was 20 when she had me, 21 probably. She was young. We're getting into it now. We're going to get into the psychology of the, the psychology of the actor. But yeah, like, she was trying to contend with her own stuff that she inherited from her, like, there's generations of like mental health issues, generations of alcoholism, and she didn't have time. Like, I didn't have my daughter until I was 38. So I had the luxury of time to try to figure out my stuff before bringing another entity into the world. She didn't. So she was trying to contend with her own issues. And I think one of the reasons why we moved around so much is she was in pursuit of love and pursuit of validation. And so as she pursued those things, she wasn't fully able to give us what we needed. And so when I found acting, it gave me a voice. It acknowledged my feelings. It gave me validation. It gave me things that I absolutely needed. Like, my brother has unfortunately dealt with addiction his entire life. I don't know what my outcome would have been had I not found something that provided me with so many of the things that I needed at such an early age.
Yes, yes. And you made a comment I had listened to on a previous podcast that I love this comment. Like you said, if a person goes into acting and they're serious about it, they can't really be into anything else, even though they're working other jobs. It has to be like their primary thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I believe that because it's so, like, if there's something else you can do, do it. Because, uh, no, absolutely. Because you're not guaranteed anything. You're not guaranteed work. You're not guaranteed security. You're not guaranteed benefits. You're not guaranteed, like, you have to want to do it so badly that you'll do anything and endure that lifestyle. Like, here we are, my husband and I, we're both in our 50s. We have a 15-year-old daughter, and the work is drying up like the Sahara Desert. What are we going to do? We might have to pivot. We might have to get a job. We might have to, but we wouldn't have traded in any of the years we had acting because we've been doing what we love for 30 years, right? I'm very motivated. That's never been anything that I've lacked. That's just part of the fabric of who I am, I guess.
So, with your directing, me as a non director, not knowing anything, what are you schooled in now after your internship and after your Tennessee Williams play? Like, what do you know now that you didn't know before that obviously directors know?
Oh, well, that's a big question because there's so much I don't know. Like that's that's the next part of my journey is developing my skill set. But what I did learn is that I absolutely undeniably love it. The process of so intimately working with actors on a piece that I loved, one of the things that was very illuminating for me or that I was unanticipated was how much I love collaborating with designers. The designers read the play, they come up with their ideas, you meet, you see what they're bringing to the table, you negotiate. It was tricky too because we were working in the round, and that's kind of a crash course in directing because generally, I don't know how familiar you are with the terminology of theater, but if the audience is facing the stage, that's called a proscenium arch, and you have to stage that in a specific way because the audience is on one side. It's like they're looking at the TV screen. The studio space where our director's projects took place is in the round, and so you have to direct it for audience on all four sides. And I'm very lucky that I come to this experience with so much acting experience under my belt so that I understand, like, that was surprising to me is that I knew more than I thought that I knew just because I've lived in this world for so long. Things that I really need to learn about are how to incorporate technical elements, like how do you use light? What is the potential of light? What is the potential of sound? In my writing to artistic directors, I try to articulate it as I've never felt my heart so intensely tethered to another entity except for my daughter. And so you create something in collaboration with these artists. And that's another thing that has blown my mind is I've had like an epiphany in terms of what actors do, lending their talent, lending their trust, lending their faith, lending their imaginations, their heart, their passion to the person at the helm and to each other and to the script in an act of trying to collaborate on spinning magic, lifting words from a page. Everybody enters the process. It's an act of faith because ultimately you never know what will ultimately live on the stage until you get there. And that's terrifying, and it's like thrilling. I think it's something about that act of faith, and it's something about, like obviously it's exciting if you're able to communicate with an actor in such a way and then they do something and you're like, oh my God, yes, that's exactly what I was hoping for, and that you are the catalyst. You are the helmswoman, the helms person.
That's what we want to hear about because that is where you're going to make your mark again.
Well, I hope so.
I know so. I know this. I know this is happening. And it's so nice to hear someone in their 50s like talking about such newness. You're like starting new stuff.
Yeah, and my pipe dream is that when my daughter leaves the nest, she's in grade 10, is that I will be directing in regional theaters. Like, I don't really have ambitions of directing on the main stage at the Shaw or Stratford Festival. Who knows? That might change. So yeah, I'm very excited. And like, who can retire when they're an artist? So yeah, I mean, hopefully I'll be, if I have my grandmother's and my great aunt's genes and they're both in their 90s, 94 and 95, maybe I'll be directing into my 80s, damn it.
Well, I know the answer will be yes, you will be. So, I was reading about Anthony Quinn last night, and I mean, his real name was like a Latino name because he was Mexican and part Irish. He was doing books, Tara. He was doing tons of projects, and in his 70s doing these things. He'd need to live to 130 to accomplish all his plans.
That's awesome. Yeah.
You're going to be like a rich old lady.
uh, working in theater, one will never be rich, but but my experience will be rich.
We're going to support you. I don't think you're going to be able to stay in regional only because regional is fine, but you're going to be like in the Sahara filming something.
Oh, awesome.
Because I've been in people work for a long time, I did, volunteer work for a long time, and I do sales and stuff. It's like the nuances about you, you know how to really inhabit a character. And, I saw that in the Tarinya character. It was just like the things you don't do matter more than the stuff you do. I'm like, she's making a conscious decision to do these movements and glances. And imagine that as a director now, like overseeing other people and then incorporate it into a production, especially one with cameras where it's close up. There's no limit for you.
Yeah, I don't know that I'll move into film or TV directing, but I certainly love the potential of the theater. One of the things that I've got to work on with the piece that I selected was, I don't know how much you know about the work of Tennessee Williams, but his work tends to be fiercely poetic. And the play that I selected had a lot of symbolism in it. Working with actors is an incredible gift. And then to support their work visually, the theater just has so much to offer in that regard. Like, I've dabbled in visual art a little bit. I like to draw and paint and of course take photographs and whatnot. So it's kind of like a collision of many, many loves and interests.
Yes. I ran into this funny thing that struck me when I listened to you on another podcast. You were saying that when Star Trek reached out to your representative, codename Tennessee Honey, I think you said,
Yeah.
and now you're at Tennessee Williams. I was just laughing.
Yeah, the Tennessee Williams thing has been a pretty long-standing affair. I can't remember when I was first introduced to his work. Yeah, he's a very prolific playwright. Do you know Streetcar Named Desire, The Glass Menagerie, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof? These are all his plays. And they're of a time and a world. He writes the most magnificent female characters. The way he captures the human condition is kind of unparalleled, I think.
Yeah, really, you're in your element. I like the word you said, human condition. You're pretty much astute at the human condition, the condition of life, living, breathing things. It's a very interesting period that is starting to unfold for you.
Yeah, no, I'm very, very excited about the next chapter, even though I'm currently unemployed.
You mentioned Tennessee Williams, you mentioned the female character development. As I study different things in school and stuff, I would be introduced to different things. But it's like I need like a conduit. I need someone to like help me appreciate these things. I need the symbolism kind of brought out. If I'm going to watch these things, I need to kind of come away rethinking my priorities. And so I think you're going to do quite well with helping the other 99% of us.
Well, we'll see. I hope, like, one of the things that's happening right now that's a bit terrifying is that the theater hasn't recovered post-pandemic. The audiences just aren't returning. I hope that the way to turn that around is by creating rich, meaningful, resonant theater. So if people come in contact with that they are really hungry to return. I don't think that we've trained ourselves to concentrate in the way we used to. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that are not in theater's favor right now. The Shaw and the Stratford Festival are programming smaller seasons, shows that have less cast. They're reducing their company sizes. It's a precarious time for us that are working in the theater, but we will, we will proceed. We will persist.
As a seller myself, and I sell on national levels and to different things, that's where your salesmanship comes in, Tara, because it's like, again, with Steve Jobs' comment, he said people don't know what they want. If it's pitched to them as something that can really illuminate them, then we'll get off our couch and we'll go to a live thing. We need that. Like I went to see Little Orphan Annie when I was 11 years old. I still remember it like 47 years later.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, this is a whole different conversation, but I think our world is very sick. I think we are very sick right now. We do need these things to remind us who we are, that we're a global community, that we're all connected, because we're in big trouble. But anyway, that's for another day.
Yes, and your voice, for example, and how we've all come to know you through other media, we need to amplify your voice so that people can start to hear you, because people will give you an extra listen as opposed to maybe another person. And then your voice tells us kind of what we're missing. I mean, like when people hear about the butterfly that you talked about early on, it's just going to be like, man, all I'm thinking about is my next fast food burrito. You're amazing. I just can't wait to see the things that develop for you, but it's like it's up to all of us to talk about the theater and to talk about the amazing things that you're doing, because it's going to be a help to the community.
I hope so. Yeah, we'll see what happens.
That's right, and it's going to be good.